In our plush living room, which was a testament to both our tastes and the spoils of our hard-won success, I sat down, trying to absorb Tom's sudden outburst. The room, usually a haven for our deepest conversations and decisions, felt oddly suffocating today. "You know, I'm sick of being the sidekick, always doing what you say," Tom had said, his voice strained with a mix of exhaustion and defiance. His words hung heavily between us, echoing off the sleek, modern furnishings that I had chosen during one of our happier moments together. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the lines of fatigue etched deeply into his face. It was true that Tom had always been the silent force behind my dazzling career in Hollywood, handling everything from intricate travel plans to negotiating contracts. He did it all without ever stepping into the limelight himself. Now, as we ventured together into the fashion industry, it seemed his role hadn't changed much. He was still the backbone, supporting me unconditionally. His frustration was palpable. "Tom, why haven't you mentioned this before?" I asked, my tone softening, hoping to bridge the gap that had suddenly sprung up between us. "It's not just the work, Holly. It's everything. The way we live, how we've been functioning. I handle the finances, sure, but it's your name out there, your decisions that steer everything. Where do I fit into all this, Holly? Am I just here to follow orders?" His words, sharp and filled with pent-up emotion, struck a nerve. I was taken aback. This was not the Tom I knew, or perhaps I hadn't been paying enough attention. He was right, in a way. I had been so caught up in leveraging my fame, pushing our business to new heights, that I hadn't noticed the toll it was taking on him. He had always been there, steadfast and reliable, but had I taken his support for granted? As he sat there, looking defeated yet defiant, I realized that our dynamic needed a change. I had to acknowledge his contributions, make him feel valued, not just as a support, but as a partner in every sense of the word. I didn't realize you felt this way, Tom. "I'm sorry," I began, reaching out to him. "You're not just a sidekick. You're my partner, my equal. Let's fix this. Tell me what you need, what you want. Let's make this work together." Tom looked up, a mix of surprise and relief in his eyes. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter for us, one where we both could thrive, not just in our business but in our relationship too. As I waited for him to speak, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together, as true partners. His request for time off hung in the air between us, a fragile lifeline that might mend or further fray the fabric of our relationship. As I processed his words, memories of our earlier days swirled through my mind. Tom had always been there, both during the glittering peaks and the shadowed valleys of my career. It was his steadfast support that had enabled me to shine so brightly under the Hollywood lights. And yet, here we were, grappling with feelings of neglect and underappreciation from both sides. I remember when I lashed out during my acting days, how you calmed me, supported me. "I know how it feels to be overwhelmed," I started, my voice steadier now as I tried to bridge the gap between us. "But hearing you say all this, it's a lot, Tom. I thought we were in this together, that my success was our success." Tom's expression softened slightly, a sign that perhaps he understood my turmoil. "Holly, I know we've always shared everything, but lately, it feels like you're in a world of your own. You come home, and it's all about the next business move, the next collection. I miss us." I took in his words, feeling a pang of guilt. It was true that my drive to expand our business had consumed much of my time and energy, perhaps too much. I'd been so focused on making sure we're secure, on building something lasting. I didn't realize I was pushing you away. "You're right, you deserve more than to just fit into my schedule." His mention of the shopping trips and my handling of finances brought another perspective to light. While I viewed my financial contributions as a form of support, a way to express my gratitude for his sacrifices, it had inadvertently made him feel like a secondary player in his own life. "It hurts to hear you feel ungrateful, Tom," I continued, my frustration evident. "But maybe I've been blind to your needs. You've been patient, more than I've given you credit for." His suggestion about taking time off for his parents' anniversary in Japan seemed like a small but significant step toward healing. You should definitely go to Japan, Tom. Take the 2 weeks off. They deserve it, and so do you, I conceded, realizing that it was not just a vacation he was asking for but a chance to reclaim a sense of control over his life and our relationship. Maybe I should come with you, I ventured, surprising even myself. We could use the time away, just us, to reconnect. Tom looked up, a mixture of hope and surprise in his eyes. Really? You'd do that? Leave everything for 2 weeks? I think it's exactly what we need, I replied, feeling a weight lift slightly. To remember why we started this together. I don't want to just be your boss, Tom. I want to be your partner, in every sense. As we talked, the foundation of our marriage seemed to strengthen, rebuilding on mutual respect and understanding. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was a start, a promise to each other to strive for balance and togetherness. The conversation was far from over, but as we discussed plans for Japan, I felt a glimmer of the old warmth returning between us. As Tom continued to insist on taking the time off this year, I felt a tangle of emotions. I understood the significance of the occasion. His parents' 60th birthday was not just any celebration. It was a milestone. But the manner in which he presented his request, the timing of it amidst our busiest season, it all seemed oddly forced. Why now, when he knew how critical this period was for both our professional commitments? I get it, Tom. It's important, and I want to support you, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral, despite the storm of feelings inside. But you know how crucial this time is for us. The fashion show and the Paris collection are both landmarks for our brand this year. Tom's insistence on going without me, coupled with his comment about just spending it with his family, stung more than I expected. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the dismissive ease with which he said them. It's fine, we'll just have it with my side of the family, he had said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Tom, are you sure there's no other motive here? It's not like you to push for something like this without considering all angles. You know how the business runs, we plan these schedules a year in advance. I pressed, hoping to uncover more behind his sudden urgency. He shrugged, an edge of defensiveness in his posture. Holly, I just need some time away. It's not just about the celebration. I need a break from all this, he gestured vaguely around him, encompassing the expanse of our home, which doubled as a secondary office. I thought you, of all people, would understand that. The accusation hit harder than expected. Was I being unreasonable? My mind raced back to the countless times Tom had indeed put aside his own needs for the sake of my career, our business. Yet, his approach this time felt different, almost as if he was using the event as leverage, a way to assert some control or independence in our relationship. Okay, Tom, I conceded, my voice softening. Take the 2 weeks. Go to Japan. Celebrate with your family. I want you to have that. But we need to talk about this, about us, when you return. We need to figure out how we can better balance our professional and personal lives. His face relaxed slightly, a mixture of relief and surprise at my acquiescence. Thank you, Holly. I know it's a lot to ask right now. As he left the room, a sense of unease settled over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more he wasn't telling me. His usual open and straightforward demeanor had been replaced by something more reserved, more calculating. It wasn't like him, and it certainly wasn't like us. Left alone with my thoughts, I mulled over the dynamics of our relationship. This incident had exposed cracks I hadn't fully acknowledged. Was I too focused on the business? Had I neglected our relationship to the point where Tom felt he needed to escape to find some semblance of freedom or recognition? The idea pained me. I had always considered our partnership in both life and business to be our greatest strength. As I sat there, the weight of his departure looming, I resolved to use this time apart to reflect on how we could move forward, not just as business partners, but as husband and wife who genuinely supported and understood each other's needs. This situation was a wake-up call, and I was ready to answer it. After sending the email, I waited anxiously for the time to pass. The office seemed unusually quiet, or perhaps it was just the echo of my own restlessness filling the space. The workday finally ended, and with a deep breath, I dialed Tom's number, hoping he would pick up. The phone rang several times, cutting sharply through the silence of my office, only to end in voicemail. I tried to push aside the disappointment, telling myself he might still be busy with family activities. It was early morning in Japan, and they could be out exploring or indulging in one of their meticulously planned outings. But deep down, the lack of immediate contact gnawed at me, the silence from his end amplifying my concerns about our strained relationship. Sitting back in my chair, I felt the weight of the quiet office around me. My secretary had already left, her earlier words about confronting Tom and not letting things slide echoing in my mind. She was right, if we didn't address this now, the distance between us could grow too vast to bridge. Her blunt advice, although harsh, came from a place of care and concern. It was the push I needed to not just passively wait for Tom to reach back, but to actively seek resolution. Determined, I decided to try calling again, but this time through a video call, hoping the face-to-face connection might prompt a quicker response. The phone rang again, and after a few tense moments, Tom picked up. His face filled the screen, a mixture of surprise and apprehension visible in his eyes. "Tom," I started, my voice steadier than I felt, "I'm glad you picked up. We need to talk about what's been happening between us." He nodded, shifting slightly, the backdrop of his room visible behind him. "I know, Holly. I've been thinking about our last conversation a lot." "Good, because so have I. I can't shake the feeling that there's more you're not saying." "Why did you insist on going now, Tom? Is there something you're not telling me?" My question hung between us, a virtual chasm filled with unspoken fears and suspicions. Tom sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "It's not just about the trip or needing a break, Holly. There's more. I've been feeling overwhelmed, not just with work, but with us, with how everything has been going. I needed some space to think, to miss you, to remember why we started this together." His words, honest and raw, hit me harder than I expected. The realization that we both had been feeling the strain of our roles, yet had failed to communicate our needs effectively, was sobering. "I understand, and I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner," I replied, the tightness in my chest easing slightly. "Let's use this time apart to think about how we can better support each other. Not just in business, but in our personal lives too." Tom nodded, a tentative smile forming. "I'd like that. And Holly, let's make sure we talk more openly from now on. No holding back, okay?" "Okay," I agreed, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the beginning of the end, but a necessary pause to realign our paths and find our way back to each other. As we ended the call with a promise to speak again soon, I felt a renewed sense of commitment to not only our business, but to us. The conversation was far from over, but it was a start, and sometimes, that's all you need to turn things around. I was stunned. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of the information. Wait, it was Tom's sister and her husband who proposed this trip? I asked, my voice a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Yes, Holly. They thought it would be a wonderful way to celebrate the 60th birthday together, and since you were always so busy, Tom decided it would be easier if he just took care of everything, my mother-in-law explained, her voice filled with a hint of hesitation, likely picking up on my shock and frustration. And he used my card to pay for everything? I pressed on, needing to hear all the details. The financial aspect was troubling, but the deceit cut deeper. Tom had orchestrated this entire trip behind my back, not only leaving me out of the decision-making, but also financing it with my resources without my consent. My mother-in-law sighed, yes, dear. He said you were too caught up with work and he didn't want to burden you with the details. He thought you'd be okay with it since you couldn't join. He just wanted to make everyone happy. Making everyone happy. I echoed her words, the irony bitter in my mouth. My thoughts were a whirlwind. All these years, Tom and I had navigated our marriage with the understanding that we would communicate and make decisions together, especially significant financial ones. This breach of trust felt like a slap in the face. I paused, taking a deep breath to calm myself. Thank you for telling me, really. I need some time to process this. Please enjoy the trip, and don't worry about the money for now. We'll sort it out when you return. Of course, Holly. And I'm truly sorry about this mix-up. We'll talk more when we get back, she replied, her voice warm yet filled with concern. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing. Tom's actions were completely out of character. Was there something else bothering him that led to this? His usual prudence and respect for our shared financial decisions were part of the foundation of our trust. As I mulled over these thoughts, a deeper worry crept in. What if there were other things he hadn't told me? The trust we had built felt like it was crumbling under secrets and unilateral decisions. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided that a more direct confrontation was necessary. It wasn't just about the unauthorized use of money anymore, it was about understanding why he felt the need to hide his plans and go behind my back in the first place. I set up reminders to call Tom again, repeatedly if necessary, until we could have a thorough and hopefully honest conversation. I needed to hear his side of the story, to understand his reasoning, and to see if our marriage could withstand this breach of trust. Until then, every minute felt like an hour, and every unanswered call increased my resolve to seek transparency and possibly, a way to salvage what we had built together. The revelations about the trip and Tom's financial maneuvers left me feeling a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, anger, disappointment. As my father-in-law's words sunk in, my heart raced with the implications of what had been done behind my back. Tom, the man I trusted with both my heart and our business, had used our resources without my consent, propelled by his sister and her husband's influence. I appreciate your honesty, I said, trying to maintain composure over the phone with my in-laws. It's important we handle this delicately but decisively when you return. My mother-in-law's voice quivered with anxiety. We had no idea, Holly. We thought it was a gift. Had we known, we never would have accepted. We'll make it right, I promise. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Let's not jump to conclusions about punishments just yet. The first step is to get a full understanding of what happened. We'll sort through the details when you're back. For now, enjoy your time together. We can handle the rest later. After ending the call, the silence of my office seemed louder than before. I felt isolated, grappling with the breach of trust and the deception that had woven itself so tightly around my personal and professional life. I needed to confront Tom, but first, I had to gather all the facts and prepare myself for what could be a life-changing conversation. I checked our company's financial records online, tracing the transactions linked to the black card. The extent of the expenses was staggering: flights, luxury accommodations, extravagant meals, and more. The figures stared back at me, a stark testament to the deceit. With each discovery, my resolve hardened. I needed to protect not only my personal interests, but also the integrity of our company. The financial misuse was not just a betrayal of our marriage, but a serious professional misconduct that could jeopardize our business. I drafted an email to our company's legal advisor, outlining the situation without too much emotion, seeking guidance on the steps we could take to address the financial irregularities and the potential misuse of company assets. I copied our CFO to ensure transparency and to prepare them for the potential fallout. As I leaned back in my chair, the weight of leadership felt heavier than ever. Being a female CEO in a competitive industry was challenging enough, without internal betrayals. My mind wandered to Tom's sister and her husband, their disdain for me, their competitive jabs, and now this covert operation to perhaps undermine me through Tom. The phone buzzed. It was an email alert from the advisor, agreeing to meet first thing the next morning. I switched off my computer, the screen's glow fading into the growing dusk. Tonight, I needed to gather my strength. Tomorrow, I would need it to navigate the storm. The drive home was quiet, reflective. I rehearsed the conversation I would have with Tom. How could I approach this without our emotions clouding the core issue? How could we possibly rebuild trust after such a betrayal? Upon reaching home, the house felt emptier than usual, the silence a stark reminder of the distance now between Tom and me. As I prepared for bed, the strategy for the coming days took shape in my mind. It would be a blend of personal confrontation and professional maneuvering. No conclusions tonight, just preparation and resolve. The future of our marriage and our business hung in balance, and I was ready to fight for both. Of course, the house is fine, I replied, my voice cold and even, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within me. Tom's attempt to divert the conversation was clumsy, transparent. It was clear he sensed the ground shifting beneath him, yet he couldn't grasp the extent of his own peril. Look, Holly, I just wanted to check in, he continued, his voice attempting to regain some of its usual cheerfulness. I hope you're not too swamped with work. I manage, I said curtly, not willing to provide any comfort or semblance of normalcy in our conversation. Tom, while you're there, I suggest you enjoy your time. We'll have plenty to discuss when you return. There was a pause on the line, and I could almost hear his mind working, trying to decipher my tone, the subtext of my words. Sure, Holly. We'll talk when I get back, he replied, finally, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. After hanging up, I sat in the dim light of the living room, the shadow seeming to echo the darkening of my thoughts. My plan with his parents wasn't just about revenge, it was about setting things right, about ensuring such breaches of trust and professionalism never occurred again. If Tom thought he could manipulate his way through this with simple charm and empty apologies, he was sorely mistaken. I reached out to my legal advisor again, detailing the necessity of tightening our financial oversight and expressing my intentions to audit all recent transactions thoroughly. We need to be prepared for any discrepancies, I explained. I want a complete review of all expenses charged to the company over the last 6 months. The advisor agreed, promising to have our finance team start first thing in the morning. I knew this was just the beginning. The upcoming audit would not only reveal the extent of Tom's indiscretions, but also serve as a deterrent to any future attempts by anyone within the company to misuse their position. My next call was to a private investigator. If Tom was engaging in activities that could further jeopardize our company or our personal lives, I needed to know. I need a full report on his activities during the trip, I instructed. Especially any interactions with his sister's family and any financial transactions he might be trying to hide. As I laid the groundwork for what was to come, a part of me mourned the relationship we once had. But that sorrow was quickly swallowed by a surge of determination. I had built my company from the ground up, and I wouldn't let it be compromised, not by anyone, not even Tom. The night grew deeper, and the quiet of the house enveloped me. I prepared for bed, my mind running through scenarios, anticipating Tom's moves and countermoves. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but I was ready. As I turned off the lights, the silhouette of the room seemed to echo the new reality of my life, one where vigilance was paramount, and trust, once broken, would have to be earned back, if at all. Tom to face the consequences directly. It was a harsh but necessary action, considering the extent of his betrayal. Tom, I continued, keeping my voice steady despite the satisfaction of catching him off guard, I had the company credit card you were using suspended. Misusing company funds is a serious offense, and I'm not just going to sit back and let it happen. The silence on the other end of the line was palpable. I could almost see him, scrambling to grasp the situation, his usual composure shattered by the sudden realization of the consequences of his actions. What are you talking about, Holly? Why would you do that? His voice cracked, the strain evident. He was panicking, finally understanding the gravity of his mistakes. You know exactly why, Tom. You've been using the company card for personal expenses, not just for this trip, but potentially beyond that. It's not just about the money, it's about the trust you've broken. This isn't just a small mistake, it's embezzlement, I explained firmly. But, Holly, you don't understand, this was supposed to be a surprise for the family. I was going to tell you about it. He trailed off, his excuses sounding feeble even to his own ears. A surprise that costs thousands of dollars on a company card is not a surprise, Tom, it's theft. And using the executive excuse about keeping the house clean? Really, Tom, as if that would manipulate me into overlooking your financial indiscretions, I said, my disdain clear. In the background, I could hear murmurs and whispers. Tom's family was likely catching on to the fact that something was seriously wrong. My sister-in-law and her husband, the instigators of this extravagant and ill-planned trip, would also have to face the reality of the situation. You need to return home immediately, Tom. We will be having a serious discussion about your role in the company and our marriage. I expect full transparency and cooperation in the upcoming financial audit, I continued, setting the terms for what was to be a very difficult but necessary confrontation. The call ended abruptly, Tom's excuses and protests dying down as he realized the futility of arguing. My heart raced with a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a strange relief that I was finally taking control of a situation that had spiraled so far out of control. As I turned off the speaker, my secretary glanced at me with a mix of awe and concern. "Are you okay, Holly?" she asked gently. "I will be," I replied, mustering a smile. "Thank you for being here. Let's focus on the show for now. We have a lot to prepare, and I need to be at my best." As we drove on, my mind was already shifting back to the demands of the fashion show, but part of me was already preparing for the challenges that would follow once Tom returned. The road ahead would be difficult, but necessary to salvage both my company's integrity and, if still possible, our marriage. As I listened to Tom's distraught voice over the phone, a mix of emotions washed over me. Despite everything, hearing him in such a state tugged at my heartstrings, but I reminded myself of the deceit and manipulation that had led us here. "Tom, you need to understand the gravity of what you've done," I began, my voice calm but firm. "Using company funds for personal expenses, especially to this extent, is not just a breach of trust between us, it's a legal issue." Tom's breaths were heavy and uneven, a stark contrast to the usual confidence he exuded. "But Holly, I thought." "There's not much to think about, Tom," I interrupted. "You made decisions without considering the consequences or discussing them with me. And now, there are real consequences, not just for you, but for everyone involved." I could hear the desperation in his voice as he tried to grasp at any semblance of sympathy. "Holly, please. I'm in a real mess here. Can't you see? What am I supposed to do now? The hotel staff are aware of the situation. I've explained everything to them. They won't press for immediate payment, but you will need to sort this out legally when you return. As for now, you need to handle the situation there with your sister and her family. It's time you took responsibility," I explained. Tom was silent for a moment, likely processing the lifeline I had extended by speaking to the hotel staff. "Thank you, Holly. I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say right now, Tom. Just come home safely, and we'll sort out the rest here," I said, signaling an end to the conversation. As I hung up the phone, my secretary looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Are you okay, Holly?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief mixed with sadness. "I will be," I reassured her. "Thank you for sticking by me through this. Let's get back to work. We have a show to run, and I don't want this mess to distract us any further." As we turned our attention back to the preparations for the fashion show, my mind was still partly with Tom and the chaos he was experiencing. But I had a business to run, and my focus needed to be on the success of our upcoming event. The personal turmoil would have to wait until the dust settled, and I could confront Tom face to face about the future of our relationship and our business. In that moment, as I watched my team working diligently around me, I felt a deep resolve to protect the company I had built from the ground up. No personal drama could be allowed to jeopardize that. The entire ordeal had taken a twist I hadn't fully anticipated, but in the chaotic whirl of events, I found a bizarre sense of closure. The shock of seeing Tom and his sister's family stranded in such dire circumstances might have been overwhelming for some, but for me, it was a stark reminder of the consequences of their actions. After ending the chaotic video call, with Tom's desperate pleas fading into the backdrop of an angry crowd, I sat back and let out a long, slow breath. My in-laws had surprisingly turned into unexpected allies, having flown back in the luxury I extended as a thank you for their support and understanding. They had seen through Tom's schemes and chose to stand by me, recognizing my situation and allowing me to handle things as I saw fit. As I resumed my work, the intensity of the fashion show preparation seemed almost mundane compared to the drama that had just unfolded. My team, oblivious to the full extent of my personal life drama, continued their tasks with the usual urgency and creative flair necessary for such a high-stakes event. I appreciated this return to normalcy, focusing on the beautiful garments, the runway layout, and the lighting cues. Later, as I confirmed the details of my upcoming performance at the hotel, the manager was more than accommodating, thrilled at the prospect of hosting someone of my renown. "We're so excited, Holly. Your performance is going to be the highlight of our season," he had said, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm. It was a strange return to my roots, singing at the hotel, a place that had unwittingly become a significant part of my personal saga. In the weeks that followed, I kept in touch with the hotel receptionist, who provided me with updates on Tom and his group. Despite the harshness of their new reality, I felt a certain justice in their situation. They were safe from life-threatening harm, a condition I had insisted on, but they were learning a tough lesson about respect and consequences. My divorce from Tom was finalized quietly, with none of the public spectacle often associated with separations of our stature. It was a relief to put that chapter of my life behind me, to no longer be tied to someone who had so fundamentally betrayed my trust and our shared commitments. Life since then had been refreshingly peaceful. My relationship with my in-laws remained strong, a rare outcome in such situations, but one I cherished deeply. They occasionally joined me at public events and private gatherings, a testament to our mutual respect and affection. Work was as fulfilling as ever. The fashion shows continued to draw attention and acclaim, my brand growing stronger without the shadow of Tom's misdeeds. Every so often, I'd pause in my office, overlooking the bustling streets below, a content smile crossing my face as I thought about how far I'd come, not just in my career, but in my personal growth and resilience. Life had indeed thrown me some unexpected curves, but I stood today stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Tom and his conspirators were a distant memory, a stark lesson in the values of trust and integrity, and I was moving forward, my eyes firmly set on the future. My life seemed to unfurl in ways I had never imagined as I sat in the sterile, softly lit hospital room, still grappling with the sheer physical and emotional toll of childbirth. The baby, our daughter, lay swaddled in a small hospital bassinet, her gentle breathing a soft whisper in the quiet room. Henry, my husband, paced restlessly by the window, his face a contortion of emotions I couldn't quite read. The scene was tranquil, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. It was then that a young woman entered the room, someone I had never seen before. Her presence was like a cold gust of wind, sudden and unsettling. Henry, upon seeing her, stopped pacing. His expression shifted from confusion to a forced neutrality, as if what was about to unfold was something inevitable, something he had resigned himself to long before this moment. "I want to marry Mia, so I'm leaving you," he blurted out, his words slicing through the air with a clinical coldness. I stared at him, my mind a tumult of disbelief and shock. Mia? Who was Mia? And why now, just after I had given birth to our child? His explanation was a litany of grievances. According to him, our marriage had become a hierarchy where I played the tyrant. He claimed I did nothing but order him around, that my attitude was intolerable. But it was Mia who had been his solace, the person who had listened and provided comfort when he felt most low. I wanted to laugh, or scream, at the absurdity of his words. The reality was far different. I felt it was I who had always been pushed into the role of the organizer, the doer. He hardly lifted a finger unless prompted. As he spoke, my body ached to stand, to confront him with my truth, but postpartum fatigue chained me down, making even speaking a laborious effort. I could only listen, my heart fracturing with each word. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It opened to reveal Olivia, a figure both of us knew, but under circumstances neither of us could have predicted here. As Olivia stepped in, the color drained from Henry's face. The room tensed with anticipation. Then, Olivia spoke, her voice cutting through the thick atmosphere. "Excuse me," she began, "my name is Melanie Johnson. I'm 29 years old and currently pregnant with my first child." Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that felt both invasive and necessary. This revelation shattered whatever semblance of normalcy was left in the room. The air felt charged, heavy with the weight of unspoken stories and unacknowledged truths. Henry and I had met as fresh graduates at the same company, thrown together by corporate tradition that paired new employees with second-year mentors. Henry had been my mentor, patient and ever helpful, easing my transition into the complex corporate world. His kindness had made my first year bearable, and even enjoyable. As time passed, I graduated from mentee to mentor, taking on the responsibility of guiding a newcomer with Henry's advice still ringing in my ears. Even after our formal partnership ended, we continued to collaborate closely, a testament to the genuine bond we had formed. He was always the helper, the go-to person for anyone in need. It wasn't just to me, his generosity was extended to all. But now, as I looked at him, I saw a man divided, torn between the facade of the helpful colleague and the reality of a man overwhelmed by his inability to say no, not just at work, but at home and in his personal life. His admission of seeking solace in someone else, in Mia, wasn't just about our failed dynamics, it was a cry for help, a man drowning in his own life choices. As Olivia continued to unveil her connection to us, to this tangled web we had woven unknowingly, I realized that our story was far from over. There were truths yet to be uncovered, motives to be understood, and a future to be navigated, not just for Henry and me, but for our daughter, whose innocent slumber was oblivious to the complexities enveloping her very existence. As I navigated through the early stages of my pregnancy, I was anchored to our home, a prisoner to the relentless waves of nausea and dizziness that struck without warning. The bright and energetic mornings that once started with me bustling around the kitchen, preparing breakfast for Henry and myself, were now a distant memory. Instead, I spent most days curled up on the sofa, a blanket draped over me, my world reduced to the confines of our living room. The smell of food, once a comfort, now triggered bouts of sickness, forcing us to rely increasingly on takeout and prepackaged meals. "Sorry, it's just ready-made food again today," I would mutter apologetically, as Henry returned home from work. "It's okay, the food is good," he would reply, his tone neutral, devoid of any complaint. This had become our new normal, dinner conversations that were nothing more than brief exchanges about the practicalities of life, with no space for the emotions swirling beneath the surface. Despite his gentle demeanor and his assurances that the food was fine, there was an undeniable distance growing between us. It felt as though Henry, while physically present, was emotionally retreating from the realities of our shared life. He would ask if I was okay, his voice tinged with concern, yet his actions, or lack thereof, spoke louder than his words. The household chores, once a shared responsibility, now loomed over me as yet another burden I couldn't handle alone. One day, overcome by a particularly severe bout of sickness, I found myself calling out to him from where I lay. "Henry, I'm feeling really sick. Could you hang the laundry that's in the washer?" "Sure, got it," he responded, his voice carrying a hint of readiness to help. But as I listened to the distant thuds and clinks from the laundry room, a realization dawned on me: Henry's kindness, while a fundamental part of who he was, often shielded him from fully engaging with the personal struggles of those closest to him. He was always ready to lend a hand, to take on tasks, but it seemed he did so more out of a sense of duty than a shared emotional investment. As the days turned into weeks, and the physical toll of my pregnancy deepened, I watched Henry juggle his innate desire to help with his inability to fully immerse himself in the emotional aspects of our partnership. It wasn't just about doing chores or handling the practicalities of daily life, it was about understanding and sharing the weight of this transformative period in our lives. The gap in our emotional connection became more pronounced as my due date approached. Each day was a reminder of how much had changed and how much more was about to shift. As much as I valued Henry's kindness and his unwavering support in practical matters, I longed for him to see beyond the tasks and the to-do lists, to truly comprehend the depth of the journey we were on together, not just as parents-to-be, but as partners navigating the complexities of life side by side. No, I didn't get the light bulb. You didn't ask for it. These words echoed in my mind as I sat on the sofa, my body heavy with fatigue. Henry's literal approach to household tasks had become a repetitive pattern, one that increasingly left me feeling drained rather than supported. True, he was always willing to help. There was no doubt about his good intentions or his readiness to assist whenever I made a request. Yet, the constant need to direct him, to spell out each task, was becoming a silent strain on me, especially now, amid the physical and emotional demands of pregnancy. I remembered the early days of our marriage, filled with mutual enthusiasm for our shared life. Back then, the division of labor seemed like a small thing to adjust to, a quirk of Henry's personality that I found endearing in some ways. He was incredibly efficient, after all, executing any task with precision once prompted. But as our lives grew together, this trait, once a minor irritation, loomed larger. It struck me then, as I reflected on our relationship dynamics, how our professional roles had subtly bled into our personal lives. When I was Henry's junior at work, I relied on him for guidance and support. He was my mentor, always there with the right advice when I reached out. However, he rarely initiated discussions or offered help without being asked first. This pattern had seamlessly transitioned into our home life. The realization was bittersweet. Here was Henry, a man who could always be counted on, yet his reliability came with a caveat: he needed to be asked, every time. It wasn't just about the light bulbs, the groceries, or the dishes. It was about the need for anticipation, the unspoken gestures of care that are the lifeblood of a shared existence, particularly in times of vulnerability. One afternoon, as I watched him sorting the groceries he had just bought, items I had listed for him, I decided it was time to address this gap between us. "Henry," I began, my voice calm but firm, "I appreciate how you always help out when I ask. But sometimes, I wish you could take the initiative to do things without me having to ask every time." Henry looked up, surprise etched on his face. "I just want to make sure I'm doing what you need," he replied, his voice tinged with a hint of defensiveness. "I know, and I love you for that," I said, reaching out to touch his hand. "But being a partner isn't just about responding to requests. It's about sharing the load, noticing things on your own. It's about taking care of each other without having to be asked." There was a pause, a moment of reflection. I could see Henry processing my words, and I hoped he understood not just the surface meaning but the deeper call for connection I was making. "I'll try," he finally said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I'll try to be better at that." His response was a small step, but it was a start. As we navigated the remaining months of my pregnancy, I held on to the hope that our partnership could grow into one where care was intuitive, where support was given freely and not just on request. Olivia's face turned serious as I began to share the recent strains in my relationship with Henry. It felt somewhat relieving to talk to someone who knew us both professionally and who might understand the subtleties of our dynamic. "Well, I'm feeling better physically, but things with Henry, they've been challenging," I admitted, hesitating a bit as the words left my mouth. Olivia listened intently, her expression a mixture of concern and attentiveness. "You know, Henry has always been the type to respond rather than initiate. Lately, that aspect of him has started to impact us more significantly," I continued, the frustration evident in my voice. "It's like he can't take any action unless specifically directed, and it's wearing me down, especially now, with the pregnancy." Olivia nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly in thought. "I remember you mentioning that before. It must be tough having to spell out everything, especially when you're supposed to be partners taking care of each other." "Yes, exactly," I sighed, feeling a mix of relief and sadness that someone else could see my predicament. "And it's not just the household chores or the groceries. It's his overall engagement. Even when I express how tough things are, He just doesn't seem to take it on as part of his own responsibilities. He sympathizes as if my struggles are mine alone, not ours. Olivia's face showed a flash of determination. Have you tried talking to him about this? I mean, really laying it out clearly how much this is affecting you. I nodded slowly. I have, a few times. But it doesn't seem to sink in. He listens, he nods, but then nothing changes. It's like we're stuck in this loop where I'm increasingly becoming the nagging wife, and he's the oblivious husband, and it's exhausting, Olivia. She leaned forward, her tone soft yet firm. Meline, it sounds like you need to have a deeper conversation with him. Maybe involve a counselor or someone who can help facilitate. It's important, especially with the baby coming. You both need to be on the same page, and it sounds like Henry might need some help understanding how to do that. I pondered Olivia's words. The idea of counseling had crossed my mind before, but I had hesitated, worried about how Henry would perceive the suggestion. Yet, hearing it from Olivia, seeing her concern and knowing her understanding of our backgrounds, it felt like a viable step, perhaps the only step left to bridge the growing gap between us. Yeah, you might be right, I finally said, feeling a tentative hope. It's worth a try. We can't continue like this, and maybe having a neutral third party might help him see things differently, help us find a way to connect again. Olivia smiled, a supportive, reassuring smile. I think it's a great idea, Meline. Remember, it's not just about getting through this, but building a foundation that will hold you both, especially when the baby arrives. Her words, warm and encouraging, stayed with me as we wrapped up our conversation. It was clear what I needed to do next. As daunting as it was, the thought of seeking counseling offered a glimmer of hope for Henry and me, a chance to mend the frays in our relationship and to strengthen our bond before our family grew. I felt a resolve building within me, fueled by the support of an old friend and the desire for a better future for all three of us. We take a walk, or do you need help with anything? His silence on these matters was deafening, a stark contrast to the diligent partner he had been at work when we first met. As the days passed, the gap between us seemed to widen with each quiet dinner. Each night, he returned late. The house felt colder, the silences longer. I pondered Olivia's words, her suggestion that something more might be at play with Henry's late nights. Was it an affair? The thought churned in my stomach, a mix of fear and anger bubbling up. I didn't want to believe it, but the seeds of doubt were already sown. One evening, as I sat alone on the couch, a plan began to form in my mind. If Henry was indeed hiding something, I needed to find out. Not just for my peace of mind, but for the sake of our future child. I decided I would start by checking his phone when he was asleep or in the shower, looking for any signs of unusual calls or messages. The next morning, as Henry showered, I quietly picked up his phone from the bedside table. My hands trembled as I typed in the passcode, half hoping I wouldn't find anything, yet driven by a need to know. The phone unlocked, and I quickly went through his call logs, messages, and even his GPS history. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but then I noticed a recurring number that didn't match any of his usual contacts. As I dug deeper, I found messages that confirmed my worst fears. They were from someone named Mia, and the tone was unmistakably intimate. My heart sank as I read through them, each message a hammer blow to my trust and our marriage. The realization that he had been lying, not just about his work hours, but about something as profound as fidelity, was overwhelming. I sat back, the phone heavy in my hand, feeling a mix of vindication and devastation. I was right, but the truth did not bring relief, only a profound sorrow. The rest of the day passed in a blur, my thoughts swirling, trying to grapple with the reality of my findings. When Henry came home that night, his usual cheerful greeting felt hollow. "Hey, how was your day?" he asked, oblivious to the storm inside me. I looked at him, the familiar features now marred by the betrayal. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "It's important." Henry's expression changed, a flicker of concern passing over his face as he nodded. "Of course, what's up?" Not here, I replied, gesturing for him to follow me to the living room where we could speak without interruptions. As we sat down, I took a deep breath, preparing myself to confront him, to demand the honesty and respect our relationship deserved, no matter how painful the next steps might be. But order me around and you have a bad attitude, but it was Mia who was there for me when I needed someone to talk to. Henry's words hit me like a punch to the gut, the shock and disbelief reverberating through me. Mia? Marry her? Leave me? The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening clarity. I looked at him, the man I thought I knew, the man I had built a life with, and felt a surge of betrayal unlike anything I had ever experienced. What are you saying? I managed to choke out, my voice trembling with a mix of hurt and anger. Henry's expression remained unchanged, as if he had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times. I'm saying that I want to be with Mia. I'm leaving you, he repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I struggled to comprehend the magnitude of his words. How could he do this? How could he throw away everything we had built together, everything we had shared, for someone else? Mia, the name echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the betrayal unfolding before me. I felt a surge of heat rise within me, a mix of rage and sorrow threatening to consume me whole. How could you? I whispered, the words barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Henry didn't respond, his gaze shifting to the woman beside him, a woman I now recognized as the source of my crumbling marriage. Mia looked back at me, her expression a mixture of defiance and satisfaction, as if she had won some twisted game. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The pain of betrayal gave way to a steely resolve, a determination to rise above the wreckage of my shattered marriage. I may have been blindsided by Henry's betrayal, but I refused to let it define me, to let it break me. With a trembling hand, I reached out to cradle my newborn daughter, the tiny bundle of life that represented hope amidst the chaos. We'll be okay, I whispered to her, my voice filled with a newfound strength. We'll find a way through this, together. As Henry's words hung in the air, a cruel echo of his betrayal, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that I would write on my own terms, with my daughter by my side. Whatever lay ahead, I was determined to face it head-on, to reclaim my strength and rebuild my life from the ashes of betrayal. And with my daughter in my arms, I knew that I had all the motivation I needed to keep moving forward, one step at a time. And confronting him, Henry seemed to falter, his confidence wavering in the face of Olivia's directness. Mia, on the other hand, remained composed, her hand still clasped tightly in Henry's. I could see the uncertainty flickering in her eyes, a hint of apprehension beneath the surface. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what needed to be said. Yes, Olivia. I want a divorce, I declared, my voice steady despite the storm raging within me. And yes, I want to be with Mia. The words hung in the air, a heavy silence settling over the room as Henry and Mia exchanged bewildered glances. It was as if reality had suddenly shifted, the pieces of our fractured marriage falling into place with a painful clarity. Wait, Meline, please, Henry pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It's just Mia and we. But his words faltered, his gaze dropping to the floor as if unable to meet my eyes. It was then that I realized the depth of his betrayal, the extent of the lies he had woven to conceal his infidelity. And with each passing moment, the anger within me burned brighter, fueled by the injustice of it all. Olivia stepped forward, her expression softening with empathy. Meline, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. But I shook my head, cutting her off, before she could finish. It's okay, Olivia. None of this is your fault, I said, my voice firm with resolve. I appreciate you being here, but I think it's best if Henry and I handle this on our own. With a nod of understanding, Olivia handed me the envelope she had been holding, her eyes filled with concern. Take your time, Meline. And remember, you have people who care about you, who want to see you happy. I took the envelope, the weight of it heavy in my hands, and watched as Olivia and Henry made their way to the door, Mia trailing behind them. As they left, a sense of finality settled over me, the beginning of the end of one chapter and the start of another. Alone in the hospital room, with my newborn daughter sleeping peacefully beside me, I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and uncertainties. But I also knew that I had the strength within me to face whatever came my way, to rebuild my life on my own terms, for myself and for my daughter. With a deep breath, I opened the envelope Olivia had given me, ready to take the first step toward a new beginning, toward a future where I was no longer defined by the actions of others, but by the choices I made for myself. I love. Mia's words hung in the air, her tears adding weight to her plea. But despite her emotional display, I couldn't bring myself to sympathize with her. The evidence of Henry's betrayal was irrefutable, and Mia's attempt to paint herself as an innocent victim rang hollow in my ears. You may not have known Henry was married, but that doesn't excuse your actions, I said, my voice cold with anger. You willingly participated in his deception, knowing full well the pain it would cause. Mia's shoulders slumped, her expression one of defeat as she realized the gravity of her actions. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. But apologies were not enough to undo the damage that had been done, the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. And as I looked at Henry, his facade of innocence crumbling before me, I felt a surge of determination to reclaim my life, to protect my daughter from the chaos he had brought into our world. I want a divorce, I declared, the words heavy with finality. And I want full custody of our daughter. Henry's expression darkened at my words, his eyes flashing with anger and resentment. You can't do that, he protested, his voice tinged with desperation. She's my daughter too. But I shook my head, unyielding in my resolve. You forfeited any right to her the moment you chose to betray us, I said, my voice unwavering. I won't let you hurt her anymore. With a heavy heart, I turned away from Henry and Mia, their presence a painful reminder of the betrayal that had torn our family apart. But as I looked down at my sleeping daughter, her innocent face a beacon of hope amidst the chaos, I knew that I had made the right decision. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, with the strength and resilience born of a mother's love. And as I held my daughter close, I vowed to protect her from the pain and heartache that had consumed our lives, to build a future where she could thrive, free from the shadow of her father's betrayal. The president's voice was stern, his disappointment palpable as he addressed Henry. It was clear that this was not the first time Henry had found himself embroiled in such a scandal, his reckless behavior tarnishing the company's reputation. I'm sorry, sir, Henry mumbled, his gaze fixed on the floor, unable to meet the president's eyes. It won't happen again. But the president shook his head, his expression grave. I'm afraid it's too late for apologies, Henry. Your actions have consequences, not just for you, but for the entire company. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Henry's shoulders slumped, the weight of his mistakes crushing him beneath their burden. And as I watched him, a part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the man who had once been my husband, who had now become a cautionary tale of the dangers of deceit and betrayal. But amidst the chaos and turmoil, one thing remained clear, my daughter and I deserved better. And as the president turned to leave, his parting words echoed in my mind, a reminder that despite the challenges ahead, there was still hope for a brighter future. Take care of yourself, Melang, he said, his tone softened with genuine concern. And remember, you're not alone. We'll do everything we can to support you. With those words ringing in my ears, I watched as the president and Olivia left the hospital room, leaving Henry and Mia to face the consequences of their actions alone. And as the door closed behind them, I felt a sense of closure wash over me, a new chapter beginning in my life, one filled with possibility and promise. But amidst the uncertainty of what lay ahead, one thing remained certain: I would do whatever it took to ensure a better future for myself and my daughter, to rise above the betrayal and heartache, and to find the happiness and fulfillment we both deserved. After the divorce, I decided to stay with my parents to provide a stable environment for our daughter during her early years. It allowed me some time to recuperate after all the hardships. Henry, my ex-husband, faced consequences for his actions. He was transferred to a remote branch of the company, effectively isolating him from the central operations. It was a reminder of the price he paid for his infidelity and indifference. As for Mia, she felt the repercussions of her actions as well. Cut off by her uncle, the president, she lost her job and support. It was a harsh lesson in the consequences of her behavior, a stark reality check for someone who had previously only thought of herself. For me, returning to my parents' home provided a supportive environment for raising our daughter during her formative years. Henry's transfer and Mia's dismissal served as tangible reminders of the fallout from their choices. I was born into a world where my last name carried more weight than I ever wanted it to. With a father who's the big-shot CEO of a company that dominates the stock exchange, you could say I had a life laid out for me, complete with all the privileges and expectations. But while my family's wealth could open doors to lavish lifestyles and extravagant indulgences, I never felt drawn to that world. Sure, the money was nice, but it never defined me. I always kept my feet firmly planted on the ground, knowing that there were things more valuable than material wealth. So, I chose a different path, one that led me away from the glitz and glamour of high society and towards something more meaningful. Charity work became my passion. I found fulfillment in helping those in need and making a difference in their lives, something no amount of money could buy. I lived a life that was, well, ordinary, but to me, it was extraordinary in its own way. I didn't need designer labels or champagne breakfasts to feel content. One typical evening, my friend Sarah decided we needed to break out of our routine and dragged us to a dive bar downtown. It was the kind of place where the beer was cheap, and the lighting was dim enough to hide your regrets. Sarah was buzzing with excitement, going on about some guy she met online who she was convinced was my perfect match. As fate would have it, the guy Sarah had in mind wasn't the one who caught my attention. Instead, it was Alex, a guy who seemed as out of place in that dive bar as a cat at a dog show. He wasn't dressed to impress, just in a simple tee and jeans, but there was something about his easy smile that drew me in. We struck up a conversation, and it flowed effortlessly. Alex talked about his job as a manager at a place I'd never heard of, but the passion in his voice was palpable. "You really dig your job, huh?" I asked, intrigued by his enthusiasm. "Absolutely," he replied, leaning in. "Every day's a challenge, but hey, I'm not here to bore you with work talk." We talked about everything and nothing as the night wore on, our group mingling around us. It was refreshing to connect with someone who wasn't trying to impress me with their wealth or status. Alex seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not because of my family name, but because of who I was. As the night started winding down, I noticed a look in Alex's eyes, a hint of something more. And in that moment, I couldn't help but wonder where this unexpected connection might lead us. Alex's proposal caught me off guard, but in the best possible way. As we walked home, Sarah couldn't contain her excitement, teasing me with "I told you so's" and giggles. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake off the mix of surprise and anticipation swirling inside me. Alex had been a breath of fresh air in my often stale world, and the idea of dinner together sounded more enticing than ever. Our casual hangouts soon turned into spending more time at each other's places, with my cozy apartment becoming our preferred spot, mainly because Alex's roommates were, well, a bit chaotic. But amidst the clutter of daily life, there was a moment that changed everything. One evening, lounging on the couch after devouring what could only be described as the world's most average takeout pizza, Alex broached the topic with a seriousness that contrasted with the casualness of our surroundings. "Jessica, how do you feel about making this a more permanent arrangement?" he asked, crumbs still clinging to the corner of his mouth. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, half expecting him to suggest something mundane like splitting a Netflix account. But his next words took me by surprise. "I was thinking more like a life together," he said, his easy chuckle filling the room. In that moment, with the simplicity and straightforwardness of his proposal, everything clicked into place. There were no grand gestures or dramatic backdrops, just us, in our element, and it felt right. "Yes," I replied without hesitation, feeling a rush of excitement. 1,000 times, yes. And just like that, with the aroma of cheap pizza as our witness, we decided to tie the knot. It was swift, but when you know, you know. The next hurdle was telling our families. My parents, with their "as long as you're happy" mantra, seemed surprisingly supportive, although I could sense their skepticism lurking beneath the surface. Breaking the news over a fancy dinner felt surreal, with Dad pausing midair with his fork and Mom smiling a bit too tightly. But despite their initial reservations, their love for me was undeniable, and they eventually came around, accepting Alex into our family with open arms. Alex's family, on the other hand, presented a different challenge. Their cozy little house, perpetually smelling of fresh cookies, seemed like the epitome of warmth and comfort. But I couldn't help feeling a twinge of nervousness as we approached their doorstep, unsure of how they would react to the news of our engagement. Judy and Martin, Alex's parents, welcomed me into their home with open arms, treating me as if I had always been a part of the family. Their down-to-earth nature was a stark contrast to the world I came from, but their warmth was genuine and enveloping. As we discussed wedding plans over a plate of Judy's infamous cookies, Martin casually asked about setting a date. I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for their excitement and support. "We're thinking sooner rather than later," I replied, relieved at their positive reaction. Judy's beaming smile only added to the warmth of the moment. It became clear that while our worlds may have been different, the common ground of genuine happiness for me and Alex bridged any divide. We both agreed on keeping the wedding simple and true to ourselves, a small ceremony with close friends and family, and of course, an open bar, because as Alex put it, if we're doing this, we're making sure everyone's having a good time. Our engagement felt swift, not because we were rushing, but because everything fell into place effortlessly. Amidst the whirlwind of planning, there were quiet moments shared between us that affirmed we were making the right decision. Living with Alex was everything I had hoped for and more. We created our little haven in the cozy, modern apartment I had rented, filled with love, laughter, and, let's be honest, a ton of takeout containers. Neither of us were culinary wizards, but we made do with our shared lack of kitchen prowess. It wasn't long before I started noticing how Judy and Martin had a subtle way of dropping hints whenever they visited. At first, it was endearing, compliments on our new coffee maker or admiration for our comfortable sofa. Wanting to be the good daughter-in-law, I would surprise them with gifts here and there, only to be met with protests of "you shouldn't have" and "this is too much." Yet, despite their initial reluctance, their hints grew more frequent and unmistakable over time. The hints from Judy and Martin became as obvious as a brick through a window, with comments about our possessions becoming more frequent. Alex, oblivious to the change in tone, would relay their latest remarks without a second thought. After splurging on a fancy new TV for them, I found myself feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. One evening, as Alex and I lounged on the couch, he praised their appreciation for the TV, calling me amazing. But I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Do they expect us to keep doing this? It's getting a bit much, don't you think? I voiced my concerns, frustration creeping into my tone. Alex seemed taken aback, insisting that his parents were just happy, not taking advantage. But as our conversation ended with an uneasy truce, it was clear that we were on different pages. Judy and Martin's gratitude had evolved into entitlement, and it was putting a strain on our relationship. I loved Alex, but I wasn't willing to become a bottomless ATM for his parents. Then, when my dad's company hit the skids, everything changed. The cushy life I had known vanished in an instant, and with it, the dynamics of our relationship took a sharp nosedive. It wasn't a gradual shift, it was like flipping a switch from daylight to darkness. Breaking the news to Alex and his parents was a conversation I had been dreading. "Listen up, things are going to get tight. Dad's company is tanking, and we're in for a rough ride," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tremor of nerves. Alex's reaction felt like a gut punch. "You're kidding me, right? What do you mean we can't live like we used to because of your dad's mess?" His words were like ice, and for a moment, I wished the floor would swallow me whole. Judy and Martin's faces mirrored Alex's disbelief, their disappointment barely concealed. The situation had taken an unexpected turn, and navigating it was going to be a challenge for us all. Martin's reproachful tone cut through the air, accusing me of putting them in this situation. The warmth and camaraderie we once shared evaporated, replaced by a cold expectation that I was somehow to blame for my family's financial downturn. Moving in with them was presented as a temporary solution, but it felt more like a prison sentence. Our once independent life was swapped for a guest room that felt like a cell, in the house of two people who clearly saw us as a nuisance. Every day was charged with tension, a reminder of my perceived failure. Judy's sharp reminders about cutting back on expenses and Martin's comments on saving costs only added to the strain. But it was Alex's transformation that hurt the most. The man I married seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who saw me as a disappointment. Our conversations turned into minefields, every word a potential trigger for another outburst. I thought marrying him meant security, not this constant struggle. His anger flared over the smallest things, his words slicing through me like knives. It became clear that we weren't just dealing with financial stress, this was a test of our relationship. Judy's birthday dinner was supposed to be a break from the tension, but it turned into a showdown. Alex's smirk as he ordered steak and lobster for himself, throwing a condescending look my way, felt like a betrayal. And when Judy joined in, adding her 2 cents about overspending, it was the final blow. I felt trapped, torn between the disillusionment from my husband and his parents, and grappling with my own sense of failure. The future suddenly felt uncertain, and I wondered if our relationship could survive the weight of this pressure. The fury coursing through me wasn't embarrassment, but pure rage. Soup? What's this, some kind of sick joke? I snapped back, my voice sharper than I intended. Alex tried to brush it off, claiming it was just a bit of fun, but his smirk only fueled my anger. When he dismissed my concerns, calling it fun, I couldn't contain my frustration. This is your idea of fun? When the chips are down, you just show how petty you really are. I can't believe I fell for your act. The restaurant fell silent, every eye on us as I stood up, unable to stomach another moment of their disrespect. As Alex reached out, trying to play the peacemaker, I felt a surge of defiance. A scene? You think I care about making a scene after that stunt? This is about respect, something you clearly have none of. I stormed out, the weight of their stares heavy on my back as I stepped into the night. Ignoring the barrage of messages from Alex, I drove back to their place, a storm of emotions brewing inside me. How had things gone so sour? I packed my bags in record time, each folded shirt a painful reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Turning off my phone, I embraced the eerie silence, knowing that this night wasn't just the end of a disastrous dinner, it was the close of a chapter one had no interest in revisiting. Judy's birthday dinner had been a wake-up call, revealing the true colors of our relationship. With my decision made, I found myself driving to my parents' house, seeking sanctuary and advice from my dad. Walking into the familiar surroundings, I knew I was making the right choice. As my dad looked up from his papers, concern etched on his face, I realized that this was where I needed to be. My dad's concern etched his face as I poured out the evening's events, the weight of it all spilling from me in a flood. I recounted the dinner, the dynamics with Alex and his parents, and how I felt reduced to nothing but a source of income for them. Dad listened in silence, his expression hardening with every word. When I finished, he sighed, a sound carrying years of experience and a hint of sorrow. Jessica, I saw this coming. I just hoped I was wrong, he finally said, his voice steady but filled with empathy. How could I have been so blind, Dad? I thought Alex. I thought we were different, I confessed, feeling the weight of my naivety. Dad walked over, putting an arm around my shoulders. You wanted to see the best in him, in them. There's no fault in that. But people show their true colors in tough times. It's a hard lesson, but an important one, he assured me. But what do I do now? I can't go back there, I lamented, my nerves on edge. Dad's confidence was a balm to my frayed emotions. Then he shared something that took me by surprise. You know, the company situation isn't as dire as it seems. We're actually on the verge of a breakthrough. It was a strategic move, a way to weed out the opportunists. Stunned, I stared at him. So you mean to say we're not broke? His chuckle, part relief and part amusement, washed over me. Far from it. But it was important to see who would stick around when the chips were down. Unfortunately, Alex and his family showed their true selves. The revelation was a lot to process. My anger towards Alex and his parents was now mixed with a sense of vindication. They had revealed their true motives, freeing me from a future of manipulation and deceit. Dad, I don't know whether to be relieved or furious, I admitted, the conflicting emotions swirling inside me. Be both. It's okay. But remember, this experience has taught you something invaluable about people and their intentions. Use it, learn from it, Dad advised, grounding me. Walking up to Judy and Martin's house the next day felt like heading into the lion's den. I was ready for a showdown, but nothing could have prepared me for the cold reception I received. Alex stood there, divorce papers in hand, his expression a mix of triumphant disdain. After some time had passed, there came a gentle knock on my door, interrupting the quiet of my evening. Curious, I made my way to answer it, finding a delivery person standing on the other side, holding a rather large package. Perplexed, I accepted it and signed for the delivery before bringing it inside. As I carefully tore open the wrapping, my heart began to race with anticipation. Inside the package lay a breathtaking painting, depicting a tranquil scene that seemed worlds away from the chaos and turmoil I had left behind. A small note attached to the frame caught my eye, its words carrying a weight of sentiment that touched me deeply. For a new beginning. Love, Dad. Tears welled up in my eyes as the significance of this gesture washed over me. It wasn't just a painting, it was a symbol of hope, a beacon guiding me towards a fresh start. With a renewed sense of determination, I found the perfect spot to hang it in my new apartment, the very first step towards rebuilding my life on my own terms. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the familiar routine and the sense of purpose it provided. Slowly but surely, the wounds of the past began to heal, leaving behind scars as reminders of the battles I had fought and conquered. Occasionally, I would receive messages from Alex or his parents, attempts at reconciliation or apologies laced with excuses. Yet, with each communication, I remained steadfast in my resolve, refusing to be drawn back into the toxicity of the past. Instead, I focused on the present moment, embracing the newfound freedom and the endless opportunities that lay before me. I rekindled old friendships, pursued new hobbies, and rediscovered the simple joys of life that had once brought me so much happiness. Standing on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sun set on another day, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. Though the road ahead may be uncertain, I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the lessons learned and the resilience gained from overcoming adversity. After the divorce was finalized, I found myself out for coffee with Sarah, my ever-supportive friend who had been there through it all. "Girl, you look like a weight's been lifted," she commented, sipping her latte. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "You have no idea. It's like I can finally breathe again," I replied. Sarah leaned in, her expression turning serious. "So, what's next for you, Jess? You've got a clean slate now." I thought about it, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "I'm not sure, but I'm excited to find out. Maybe I'll travel, pick up some of the charity work I had to put on hold. As for love..." I paused, giving her a wry smile. "I think I'll give that a miss for a while. Just make sure you're doing what makes you happy, okay? You deserve it after all that drama," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Thanks, Sarah. That's the plan." Not long after that conversation, my phone started buzzing with calls and messages from Alex. He was pleading, saying he'd changed, that we could start over. His parents even got in on the act, sending messages filled with apologies and invitations to talk things over. Sitting in my room, phone in hand, I couldn't help but laugh. The sheer audacity was almost admirable, almost. I typed out a response, one I'd been mulling over for days. Alex, moving on means moving forward, not going back to what broke you. I wish you all the best, but this is where our path ends for good. Take care. Hitting send felt like closing the final chapter of a book I'd been stuck in for too long. And just like that, I was ready to start writing a new one. The next few months were a blur of activity. I threw myself into my work, took up volunteering with a vengeance, and even booked a solo trip to a place I'd always wanted to visit. Life was full, and for the first time in a long while, it was fulfilling too. One evening, sitting on a balcony overlooking a bustling street in a far-off city, I realized I'd found what I'd been searching for all along: peace. The drama, the heartache, the betrayal, it all seemed like a distant memory. My phone buzzed with a new message, but this time it was from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I opened it. It was from someone I'd met during my travels, someone who'd made me laugh and think in equal measure. "Hey Jessica, how about dinner when you're back?" No expectations, just food and good company. I stared at the message, a smile slowly spreading across my face. Maybe it was time to open my heart again, but on my terms, at my pace. "Yes, I'd like that," I typed back, hitting send before I could second-guess myself. Looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of excitement for the future. I had moved on, not just from Alex and his family, but from the person I was when I was with them. I was stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I found myself fully immersed in the present moment, embracing every opportunity that came my way. I rekindled old passions and discovered new interests, each experience adding depth and richness to my life. Occasionally, thoughts of Alex and his family would surface, but I remained resolute in my decision to move forward. Their attempts at reconciliation only served as reminders of the strength and independence I had cultivated in their absence. One afternoon, while sorting through old belongings, I stumbled upon the painting my father had sent me, a constant reminder of the unwavering support and love that surrounded me. With a smile, I dusted it off and found a prominent place for it in my home, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As the seasons changed and time marched on, I found myself more grounded and at peace than ever before. I had weathered the storms of life and emerged stronger on the other side, ready to embrace whatever the future held. And so, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, gazing out at the world below, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. I had come a long way from the person I once was, and I knew that the journey was far from over. With a renewed sense of purpose and a heart full of hope, I looked to the horizon, eager to see where the road would take me next. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on, knowing that I had the strength and resilience to overcome anything life threw my way. I live a quiet, somewhat predictable life with my husband, Jerry. Most days drift by with the familiar hum of routine, Jerry fussing over his morning newspaper and breakfast sandwich while keeping an eye on the weather forecast on TV. But that particular evening, the usual tranquility of our home was interrupted in the most unexpected way. It was past bedtime, and the house was enfolded in silence, save for the gentle ticking of the living room clock and the occasional rustling of leaves outside, stirred by a gentle wind. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, a sharp sound that seemed louder in the night's quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone at such a late hour, and the sound startled me out of my drowsiness. I walked to the front door with a mix of caution and curiosity, peering through the peephole before opening it. There, in the pouring rain, stood my grandson, Sam, looking utterly forlorn. He wasn't alone. On his back, secured in a makeshift sling, slept his little sister, Holly. The sight of them, especially Sam, drenched and downtrodden, pulled at my heartstrings. "Sam, what brings you here so late? Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gently shifted Holly into my arms without waking her. "Can my sister stay here tonight? And for dinner too?" His voice was so soft, almost drowned out by the relentless downpour. "First, come inside," I insisted, stepping aside to let them in. Jerry and I ushered them gently, towels in hand, trying to dry them off as they stepped into the warmth of our living room. There was a joy in my heart at seeing them, especially noticing how much Sam had grown since the last time. But this joy was tinged with worry due to the circumstances of their unexpected visit and Sam's somber demeanor. As I settled Holly on the couch, tucking a blanket around her, I noticed Sam's reluctance to join us at the dinner table where a warm meal awaited. He just stood there, looking down, lost in thought. "Sam, is there something heavy on your mind? Can you talk about it?" I asked, reaching out to touch his shoulder. He glanced up, meeting my eyes only briefly, before looking away again. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Unable to bear it, Jerry spoke up, his tone stern, which was uncharacteristic of him when addressing the grandchildren. Sam flinched at Jerry's words, then began to speak in a thin, tentative voice. He unraveled his worries, his fears, and at the end, he dropped a bombshell that shook me to my core. "I'm a burden to the family. Could you please take care of Holly?" His words were resolute, yet there was an unmistakable crack in his voice. Before we could respond, he stood abruptly, heading towards the door. "Sam, wait. Don't run away." I called out as Jerry hurried after him. Sam, now nearly as tall as Jerry, forcefully shook off his hand. "Don't run away from this. Taking care of a child isn't that simple," Jerry yelled, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. He ran after Sam, grabbing him tightly in an attempt to stop him. At least, Sam's resistance waned, and he remained silent, his head hanging low over Jerry's chest. The gravity of the moment weighed heavily on all of us, as rain continued to tap a somber rhythm against the windows. As Jerry reminisced, I pondered the complexities of our family dynamics. Our relationship with Ian and his family had become strained, not abruptly, but gradually, like a slow-moving storm cloud that you don't notice until it's directly overhead, casting a shadow over what was once sunny. Ian had met his first wife at the construction company where he worked right after high school. She was a few years older, and they were quickly married. But that marriage did not last. When he remarried Jasmine, things started to change. It wasn't that Jasmine was unkind or anything overt, she simply seemed less keen on fostering family ties, which in turn influenced Ian. The distance grew so subtly that at first, we barely noticed. But over time, missed birthdays, holidays without a visit, and unanswered messages piled up like unopened letters in a drawer. It hurt, especially seeing how it affected Jerry, who had always been a family man at heart. "Now he's a high school freshman," Jerry continued, his thoughts on Sam bringing a wistful smile to his face. "He probably understands now that tuna fishing isn't so simple." I smiled softly, thinking of Sam's youthful enthusiasm about fishing with Jerry, a plan that seemed so tangible then. "When you retire, you'll have plenty of time to make good on that promise," I reassured him, though I wondered if that gap could still be bridged after all this time. Jerry nodded, taking a slow sip of his tea. His gaze lingered on the family photo, the smiles captured in it belying the complexity of the relationships behind those happy faces. "Carolyn, it might be wise not to hang the laundry outside today," Jerry repeated, snapping me back to the present. I looked out the window at the sky, heavy with the promise of rain, mirroring my thoughts, clouded and unsure. "Yes, I suppose you're right," I replied, my voice carrying a mixture of agreement and resignation. The laundry would have to wait, much like many things in our life seem to be waiting, for the right moment, for a mending of ways, for new beginnings after Jerry's retirement. As these thoughts swirled in my head, I glanced at the newspaper Jerry had left on the table, smeared slightly with the remnants of his breakfast sandwich. "Decide whether you're reading it or eating it, please," I teased, trying to lighten the mood. Jerry chuckled, a brief sound that didn't quite mask the underlying sadness. "Some habits are hard to break," he said, his eyes not meeting mine. In that moment, I realized that retirement for Jerry wouldn't just be about finding hobbies or keeping busy. It would be about reconnecting, rebuilding, perhaps not just with hobbies, but with our family too. As challenging as it might be, it seemed necessary, inevitable. Like the approaching storm, change was on the horizon, ready or not. me wonder about the depth of his young mind. Sam, even as a child, had an unusual level of awareness and sensitivity. It was perhaps this quality that made him so endearing and also so concerning, as he seemed to carry a weight beyond his years. His mother, Ian's first wife, had been a pillar of strength and grace, even in her final days. Her serene acceptance of her fate and her concern for Sam and Ian's well-being left a profound impact on us all. "Carolyn, please look after my son for me," she had said in the hospital, her voice steady despite the circumstances. It was a request I wouldn't deny. Her passing marked a significant change in our lives. Ian, swallowed by his grief and the demands of his job, struggled to maintain the balance at home. As a result, I found myself stepping into the role she had left vacant. Every day after my part-time job, I would head to their home, ensuring Sam had his meals, helped with his homework, and received the love and attention he needed. On weekends, when Ian was often caught up at work, Jerry and I gladly welcomed Sam to our home. It was during these times that Jerry and Sam grew especially close, their bond deepening over shared activities and conversations. "Is there anywhere you'd like to go?" "Let's go wherever Grandpa and Grandma want to," Sam would say, always putting our preferences first. It was heartwarming, yet it made me reflect on how much he had to mature prematurely. He was just a child, yet he was always so considerate, always thinking of others before himself. Sam's attentiveness wasn't just limited to us. He seemed to observe and process everything around him with a thoughtful demeanor. It was as if he was constantly learning, adapting, and trying to understand the adult world at such a young age. Indeed, the house was often filled with laughter, thanks to Ian's humor and Sam's cheerful presence. Despite the undercurrent of loss, we managed to create a loving environment for Sam. His mother had left him a legacy of strength and resilience, which was evident in how he carried himself. I remembered the days when Ian, influenced by his first wife, had started to take on household responsibilities. He had tried to use a knife with his left hand, mirroring her, despite being right-handed. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about his effort and the influence she had on him. "Thanks to Ian, our home is always filled with laughter," I had often remarked, appreciating the lightness he brought into our lives despite the challenges. The memory of Ian skillfully making soup, a skill he acquired from his first wife to support her through her illness, was particularly poignant. I was always grateful for how she had shaped him into the man he had become, a caring, involved father and a more thoughtful partner. Even after she was gone, her presence was felt in our interactions, in the way Ian approached life, and most significantly, in the gentle nature of Sam, who had inherited so much of her grace and kindness. "Yes, I like it okay," Sam replied, his voice carrying a hint of reservation that didn't escape my notice. We were sitting in our living room, a rare moment of quiet togetherness since he had moved to the new school. His eyes were focused on a puzzle we were piecing together, but his mind seemed elsewhere. "You've made some new friends?" I probed gently, trying to gauge his comfort in this new chapter of his life. "Yeah, a few," he said, fitting a piece into the puzzle with meticulous care. "They're nice." I nodded, watching him intently. It was clear he was trying to adapt, to find his footing in a rapidly changing environment. Sam had always been resilient, perhaps too much so for his age. It worried me that he might be taking on more than he should, always considering others before himself. When Ian had announced his plans to remarry, it was a shock. Jasmine, despite her youth and vitality, seemed underprepared for the role of a stepmother, especially to a sensitive boy like Sam. My concerns had only deepened when they moved into my husband's brother's house, further away from us. It felt like a physical and emotional distancing that I feared might affect Sam adversely. However, every time Ian left Sam with us for their date nights, I saw a different side of the situation. These moments, though born from circumstances that stirred mixed feelings in me, were invaluable. They allowed Jerry and I to maintain our bond with Sam, to ensure he still felt the support and love of his grandparents. "Sam, if there's ever anything you want to talk about, or if something's bothering you, you know you can always come to us, right?" I said, reaching out to place my hand over his. He looked up from the puzzle, meeting my gaze with those thoughtful, mature eyes of his. "I know, Grandma." "Thank you," he replied, a small smile breaking through. It was a relief, yet a reminder of the careful balance we had to maintain, giving him the space to grow, while also being his safe harbor. The dynamic within our extended family had certainly shifted with Jasmine's arrival and their move. Yet, as I watched Sam interact with us and handle his new life, I was reminded of the strength and adaptability he had inherited from his mother. It was these qualities that gave me hope, even amidst my worries, that he would thrive despite the challenges. Still, as a grandmother, I couldn't help but feel a protective urge, a desire to shield him from any potential heartaches or hardships that might come from his new living arrangement and the responsibilities thrust upon him too early. These thoughts lingered in the back of my mind as I continued to engage with him, cherishing the moments we had together and ensuring he knew he was loved and supported, no matter what. They were doing well and weren't facing any troubles we didn't know about. The lack of contact, especially direct interaction with Sam and Holly, left a hollow feeling in my heart. Over time, it became more challenging to bridge the growing distance, and each failed attempt to visit or engage added another layer of concern. I would often reflect on the days when Sam and Holly were just here, running around our home, filling it with laughter and energy. Sam, now growing into his teenage years, and Holly, blossoming in her own right, were missing from our lives in a way that felt unnatural and forced. The situation with Ian and Jasmine was complex. Their need for financial support became a regular pattern, and although it was never easy to deny help, especially when it concerned the grandchildren, Jerry and I started to feel used rather than valued as family members. It wasn't the money that was the issue, it was the way our relationship seemed transactional, revolving around what we could provide rather than the familial bonds we longed to maintain. On quieter evenings, Jerry and I would discuss how we could better connect with Ian and Jasmine without stepping over boundaries or causing tension. It was a delicate balance, trying to remain present in our grandchildren's lives without intruding into Ian and Jasmine's family dynamics. The idea that perhaps we had done something to upset them often crossed my mind. Had we been too forward? Too eager? It was a maze of second-guessing and regret, but deep down, I knew we had always approached them with nothing but love and the best intentions. All we could do was hope that with time, things might change. Perhaps Ian and Jasmine would see our earnest desire to be a part of their lives, not as intruders, but as loving supporters. Maybe they would understand that our involvement wasn't about undermining their authority or questioning their decisions, but about sharing the joy and responsibility of raising a family. Every time the phone rang or a message came through, my heart would leap with the hope that it might be Ian or even Sam. I longed for a simple update, a photo, or a message saying they were thinking of us. But as days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, the silence grew heavier, and the hope that once buoyed my spirits began to wane. Yet, in the depths of that silence, my resolve grew. I would not let the current circumstances define our future relationship. Whether it took weeks, months, or even years, I was prepared to wait, to give them the space they seemed to need, while also remaining ready to open our doors and hearts the moment they chose to return. In the meantime, Jerry and I would keep the memories of our times together alive, cherishing each laugh, each hug, and every single day we had been blessed to share with Sam and Holly. Seeing Sam in such a state, with his clothes soaked and clinging to his tired frame, stirred a deep concern within me. The weight of Holly on his back, both literally and metaphorically, seemed immense for such a young boy. As we ushered them inside, I could see the weariness in Sam's eyes, a look that spoke volumes about the struggles they must have been facing, hidden from our view. Once inside, Jerry took Sam's wet jacket and backpack, placing them near the heater to dry. I took Holly to the kitchen, where I quickly warmed up some soup and sandwiches. Despite her young age, Holly seemed remarkably composed, a stark contrast to the usual exuberance of a 4-year-old. It was evident that these children had been through more than we had realized during our time apart. "Sam, talk to me. What's been happening?" I urged as we sat down at the kitchen table. He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the floor, before he finally met my eyes. The vulnerability in his expression was heartbreaking. "I've been doing deliveries after school," Sam began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It helps with the bills. Dad's job isn't enough these days." The revelation hit hard. The money I had been sending for birthdays clearly wasn't sufficient to cover their needs. The thought of Sam, just a high school student, taking on such responsibilities to support his family was distressing. It made me reconsider every interaction we had, or hadn't had, over the past few years. "And tonight, the rain," he continued, his voice trailing off as he glanced towards Holly, who was quietly eating her meal. It was pouring, and I didn't want Holly to get too wet on the way home from daycare. I didn't have enough for a taxi, so we had to walk until I saw the bus stop and waited there. "That's when I decided to come here," Sam concluded, the weight of his day evident in his slumped posture. Jerry, who had been listening quietly, placed a comforting hand on Sam's shoulder. "You did the right thing coming here, Sam. You're both safe here, always." The room filled with an emotional silence, the only sound being the rain drumming relentlessly against the windows. As I watched Sam and Holly, a mix of relief and sorrow washed over me. Relief that they had come to us, to safety, and sorrow for all the unseen hardships they had endured. The reality of our grandchildren's lives, so different from the happy and carefree existence we had hoped for them, was a stark reminder of how distant Ian and Jasmine had allowed us to become. It was clear that moving forward, Jerry and I needed to be more proactive in our efforts to support Ian's family, not just financially, but emotionally and physically as well. As we settled the children for the night, my resolve strengthened. No matter the circumstances, Jerry and I would be there for Sam and Holly, offering them the stability and love they desperately needed. This unexpected visit, though born out of necessity and struggle, was a pivotal moment, realigning our priorities as grandparents and reaffirming our role in their lives. Hearing Sam's story unfold in such a raw and emotional way tore at my heartstrings. I couldn't believe that our absence had been framed as disinterest, rather than a result of the barriers Jasmine had put up. It pained me deeply to think of Sam and Holly believing we didn't care for them, when in reality, nothing could have been further from the truth. "We would never think of you as a hassle, Sam. You and Holly are the lights of our life," I assured him, trying to dispel the hurtful lies he had been told. I felt a renewed urgency to reconnect the bonds that had been so maliciously misrepresented. Sam wiped his eyes, nodding slowly as he absorbed my words. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. I could see Jerry's jaw clench at the thought of how his grandchildren had been treated, his hands forming tight fists at his sides. "We're here for you, always. No matter what," Jerry said, his voice firm yet gentle, reassuring Sam of our unconditional support. As we sat at the dinner table, I served the warm meal I had prepared, hoping that the familiar comfort food would help ease some of the tension and sadness that had filled the room. Sam ate quietly, his appetite not quite matching his usual enthusiasm, but he seemed to relax slightly as the meal went on. Holly, thankfully still oblivious to the complexities of the situation, slept soundly in the guest room. After dinner, while Jerry cleaned up, I sat down with Sam in the living room. "We need to make sure you and Holly can come over anytime you need to, without hesitation," I said, thinking out loud about practical steps we could take to ensure they never felt abandoned again. "We could set up a savings account for you, if you're okay with that," I suggested. "A little emergency fund that you can access whenever you need it. For times like today, or just whenever you feel like you need a break or some support." Sam looked up, his eyes reflecting a mix of surprise and relief. "Really? Would that be okay?" "Of course," I assured him. "You're not alone in this. We want to help in more tangible ways." He nodded, the tension visibly easing from his shoulders. "Thank you, Grandma. I didn't know how much I needed to hear that until now." As we talked, plans began to form. We discussed regular visits, and possibly even weekend stays, making sure that Sam and Holly knew our home was always open to them. This time, we wouldn't let misunderstandings or manipulations keep us apart. It was clear that our role in their lives was crucial, now more than ever. We were determined to reclaim the time lost and mend the fractures that had formed in our family. Not you. We never thought taking care of you and Holly would be a burden. We love you both more than words can express, and we always will. Sam's tears gradually subsided as he listened, his breathing slowing as the initial shock and hurt began to ebb away. It was clear that the misunderstandings and the distance had deeply affected him, shaping his perceptions and responses to our attempts to reconnect. "We've missed so much already, Sam," my husband continued, his voice thick with emotion. "We don't want to miss any more. No matter what's happened, we're your family, and that's never going to change." I held Sam close, feeling his body shake with each sob. It was a release of years of pent-up emotions, a mixture of sadness, betrayal, and relief. As he cried, I could feel the barriers between us beginning to crumble, the misunderstandings clearing as he finally understood our true feelings. After a while, Sam's crying ceased, and he pulled back slightly to look at us both. "I thought you didn't want us anymore," he whispered, the confusion still apparent in his voice. "That couldn't be further from the truth," I assured him. "We've tried everything we could think of to see you and Holly. Jasmine and your father, they made it difficult for us, and we're so sorry that caused you to feel abandoned." Sam nodded, processing this new information. "I just want things to be like they were when Mom was here," he said quietly, the longing clear in his voice. "We know, Sam, and we wish we could bring those days back," my husband said softly. "But while we can't change the past, we can work on making the future better. You and Holly are always welcome here, anytime, no questions asked. This is your home too." Sam looked around, perhaps seeing the familiar surroundings of our home in a new light. "Can I really come here whenever I want? Just to hang out, or if I need a break from everything?" "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "This door is always open to you and Holly. And if you need anything, help with school expenses, a meal, or just someone to talk to, we're here." For the first time that evening, a small, genuine smile tugged at Sam's lips. "Thank you, Grandma, Grandpa. I think I needed to hear that more than I realized." The conversation marked a turning point for us all. It was a promise, a commitment renewed. We would do everything in our power to support Sam and Holly, to ensure they never felt the sting of abandonment again. And though the road ahead might still hold challenges, we were ready to face them as a family, together. "Not yours." Ian's voice was cold, his posture stiff as he sat next to Jasmine. "You have no right to interfere in how we manage our family." Jerry's expression was grim, his fists clenched at his sides. "Managing? Is that what you call this?" He gestured around the cluttered, disheveled living room. "Your children were out in the rain, with no dinner, no care." I stepped forward, my heart racing, but my voice steady. "Ian, we're not here to fight. We're here because Sam and Holly needed us tonight. They were cold, hungry, and scared. Is this really the environment you want for them?" Jasmine, who had been silent, now spoke up with a dismissive wave of her hand, still holding her beer. "Look, Carolyn, you're blowing this out of proportion. Kids get upset, they run. That's normal." "Normal?" I echoed incredulously. "It's not normal for children to feel they have nowhere else to turn but to run to their grandparents' house in a storm. It's not normal for a brother to be so concerned about his sister that he risks his own health to protect her. This isn't about one bad night, Ian, Jasmine. This is about a pattern of neglect that we can no longer ignore." Ian looked away, uncomfortable, while Jasmine's face hardened. "You think you can just come here and judge us? You don't see the everyday. You don't know." "But we want to know," Jerry interjected. "We want to help, not just criticize. Let's find a solution that works for everyone, especially for Sam and Holly." The standoff lingered as tension simmered. Ian seemed torn, his gaze shifting between Jasmine and us. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter. "What do you suggest?" "We suggest setting up regular visitation for us, so Sam and Holly have stability and another safe space. They need to know they have more than one place to turn to, I replied, trying to bridge the gap between us with a more constructive approach. And, Jerry added, we need transparency about their needs, financially and emotionally. We can help, you don't have to do this alone. Ian nodded slowly, considering our words. Jasmine seemed reluctant, but the seriousness of the situation was finally dawning on her as well. The conversation that night was difficult and fraught with emotional tension. Yet, it was a necessary step toward mending the fractured family dynamics. As we left Ian's house, the uncertainty of the outcome hung in the air like the mist of the earlier rain. But our resolve was clear: whatever it took, we would ensure that Sam and Holly had the love and support they needed to thrive. We drove home in silence, each lost in thoughts about the future, determined to follow through with our promise to protect and nurture our grandchildren, no matter the challenges ahead. We outlined our plans for Sam and Holly's ongoing education and well-being, ensuring that they would have all the necessary support to thrive, despite the upheavals they had faced. The lawyer was thorough, explaining each step of the adoption process and what it would entail. He also detailed the legal requirements for cutting off Ian and Jasmine's contact, which would require a court order given their parental rights. Although it was a daunting prospect to engage in such a legal battle, Jerry and I were steadfast in our commitment. Our first priority is the children's well-being, I told the lawyer. We need to ensure that Sam and Holly have a stable and loving environment. They've been through enough. Jerry nodded in agreement, his face set in a determined frown. We're doing this not just because we want to, but because we have to. They need someone to fight for them, and we're here to do just that. The lawyer jotted down notes and nodded. It's clear you both have the children's best interests at heart. I'll start drafting the necessary paperwork to begin the custody proceedings. It might be a challenging process, but given the circumstances, the court will likely see the merit in your case. In the days following our meeting with the lawyer, we prepared our home for the possibility of permanently welcoming Sam and Holly. We turned one of the spare rooms into a second bedroom for Holly, decorating it in bright colors and filling it with toys and books we thought she might like. For Sam, we updated his old room to reflect his current interests and needs, considering he was now a teenager with different requirements for space and privacy. Throughout this time, our emotions swung between anger at Ian and Jasmine for their neglect and excitement at the prospect of having Sam and Holly with us full-time. Despite the turmoil, the house felt alive with the anticipation of their return. Finally, the day came for the court hearing. Dressed in our most formal attire, we met with our lawyer outside the courthouse, ready to present our case. The hearing was intense, with testimonies from social services detailing the neglect and interviews with both Sam and Holly, who bravely expressed their desire to live with us. After what seemed like an eternity, the judge granted us temporary custody while the case for permanent adoption was considered. It was a significant first step, and although the road ahead was still fraught with legal hurdles, it was a victory we desperately needed. As we left the courthouse, Holly grasped my hand tightly, her small face upturned and smiling. "Does this mean I can stay with you and Grandpa now?" she asked. "Yes, Holly," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. "You're home now, for good." Sam, walking beside us, gave a small, relieved smile. It wasn't the end of our journey, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like a new beginning. With the weight of the immediate legal concerns temporarily lifted, we could focus on healing and building a future together as a family. And nurture their dreams and ambitions in an environment of unconditional love and support. As we settled into this new chapter, the children's presence redefined the very essence of what home meant to us. Sam, now more engaged in his schoolwork and extra activities, began to show signs of true healing. The anxieties that once shadowed his expressions were gradually replaced by a brightness, a reflection of his newfound stability and happiness. His academic performance improved, and his teachers often remarked on his contributions in class and his growing leadership qualities. Holly, with her innate empathy and keen sensitivity, blossomed in an environment where she felt seen and cherished. Her kindergarten teachers were full of stories about how she helped other children and how quickly she learned. Her curiosity and joy in the small things, a butterfly in the garden, a new book from the library, brought a fresh sense of wonder into our daily lives. Watching them both grow and adapt, overcoming the shadows of their past, made every effort and adjustment worthwhile. The decision to take them in, though born of necessity, had evolved into a profound blessing that touched every aspect of our lives. "Grandpa, can we go fishing again next Saturday?" Sam would ask, his eyes alight with anticipation. The fishing trips had become more than just a pastime, they were a symbol of the bond he shared with Jerry, a time for conversations not just about fish, but about life, dreams, and sometimes, the past. "Of course, Sam. You know, catching fish is much like tackling challenges in life, patience, resilience, and sometimes, knowing when to let go," Jerry would respond, imparting bits of wisdom in his gentle way. Holly, always wanting to be part of the adventures, insisted on learning how to fish too. One sunny morning, she managed to reel in her first small fish, her face a mixture of surprise and pride. "I did it, Grandma. I caught one," she exclaimed, holding up her prize for all to see. These moments, simple yet profound, filled our days with joy and laughter, pushing the darker memories further into the background. Life with Sam and Holly was not without its challenges, but each hurdle crossed seemed to strengthen the bonds between us. As I watched them from the kitchen window one afternoon, playing in the yard under the golden sunlight, I reflected on how far we had come. The worries that once loomed large about our capacity to provide them with what they needed had dissipated, replaced by a confident commitment to their well-being and happiness. In this home, they had found more than just safety, they had found a place where they could heal, grow, and dream. And as for Jerry and I, we found a renewed purpose in life, a reason to embrace each day with enthusiasm and love. The children had not only filled our home with laughter and activity, but had also filled our retirement years with a profound sense of fulfillment and joy. As the seasons changed and we watched Sam and Holly thrive, we knew that this home, once just a place of residence, had truly become a sanctuary, a haven not just from the physical storms of the world, but from the emotional and psychological tempests they had weathered. Our commitment to them was unwavering, and together, we looked forward to the future, whatever it might bring, with optimism and an unbreakable